We all know that training cannabis is the most optimal way to get everything out of our cannabis plants. And if we've been growing for any amount of time, we have probably experienced a lot of training in our days. And we know that there are a lot of training methods. But what are the two optimal ways to train your cannabis plants that many people have been practicing for a very long time? And how can you utilize these, and how exactly do they work, and why do they work better than other things? So we're going to get into all of those questions you might be having right now. Just want to let you guys know that I do stream on Twitch on a pretty regular basis, almost daily. Links down in the description below if you want to join the Twitch. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So training cannabis plants has been a thing for a very long time, probably as long as people have been growing. But what are some of the more popular methods, and which ones are a waste of time versus which ones should you be doing? It can be very hard to tell when you're just getting into the space, or if you've been doing something for a very long time and you just kind of get used to doing the same old thing over and over and over again. I fell into this loop. I'm sure a lot of you have. We're going to have to try to break out of that today. So, first training method I want to talk about that is optimal for growing cannabis plants and getting the maximum yield you possibly can is bending the plant over. Simply bending the plant over is going to maximize your yield. Now, this is a substitute method. I would consider it a substitute method for actually topping your plant. But there's a huge difference between bending your plant over and topping your plant. And one is your stress level. Your stress level is extremely important when it comes to growing methods, when it comes to treatment, when it comes to training, when it comes to watering schedule. Stress is something you're always going to have to pay attention to in every single step of your cannabis plant's lifetime. So when you talk about the stress level of your plant, you need to consider two things. Is it optional? Is there a better way to do it with less stress? So if something is necessary and it causes a lot of stress, if it is necessary to further the plant's growth, something like a transplant, obviously you're going to have to go ahead and do that thing. So go ahead and do that thing for sure. But if there was a substitute for transplanting, say you wanted to start in the finishing pot, you can obviously do that. However, not a lot of people do that, especially when they're growing photoperiod plants. And I assume that's a lot of my fan base because I don't talk about autos a lot, but I could be wrong. So let me know down below, what plants do you grow? Do you grow photo plants or do you grow auto plants? But I digress. You're going to want to look at that. You're going to want to look at the stress level. And when you have a high stress level thing that is not necessary and there's something better like topping, you're going to want to avoid doing that thing as much as you possibly can. And the reason being is because if you bend the plant over, which is the first training method, it is a huge substitute and a huge net gain to your plant's overall yield. This is going to make sure you have a maximum amount of tops, a maximum amount of branches to choose from for doing other training methods on, and it's going to give you the maximum opportunity to make your plant wider because it's going to grow a lot more. So if you're not familiar with topping, let's talk about topping for a second. Topping is when you take the top off your plant. You just go ahead and take the top off. And then what happens as a consequence of this is that in its place, two nodes are going to sprout out at the same time at similar lengths. If you have topped a plant before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, just imagine that someone cut the top of a cannabis plant in half and there was subsequently two growing at the same time outside of that stalk. That's essentially what topping makes your plant look like. Why bending it over is optimal is because as your plant grows, it's going to grow shoots on the side of your plant. It's going to grow nodes on the side of your plant. Those plants, or those shoots and those nodes, are going to turn into branches. If you have branches that are extremely low on your plant because they grew all at the same time, you'll have a couple branches that are up like this, and then you'll have a top that's like way up here. And what this will do is it'll give it its natural Christmas tree looking shape. And you don't want a Christmas tree looking shape if you want to get a maximum yield out of your plant. But what you can do is when that plant is very young and it has its Christmas trees poking out, you can bend it over, making the main stem even with all of them, and then the top shoots up into one branch and it's even with all the others, and then all of the other branches also shoot up. So instead of multiplying your gains by 2, you'll be multiplying your gains by 7, by 12, by 16, by 18, by 34, however many branches you can possibly get out of it. And here's the real kicker. When you have all of those tops, and you do another round of bending it over and widening out that plant, and possibly turning it around in its pot, and spinning it around the pot as it grows, you can have so many more tops than you would have if you simply topped. And not only that, bending your plant over is going to ensure that it has a low stress level throughout the entire veg stage, or at least a lower stress level than it would have if you decided to do a couple rounds of topping. Let's say 5 rounds of topping. So you top your plant, fantastic. You took one single top off, 2 tops grew out of it, and then you do another top, and 4 come out of there, and then 6, and we're gonna stop the math there. What happens every single time you top, you're going to delay your growth by a couple of days. It could be 3, it could be 4, but you're going to have a recovery period, and then you're going to have the plant start growing again. Whereas when you train a plant, within hours, your plant is already sticking up, already trying to recover, already trying to find the light, and that's why you can tie your plants down, and it'll make this training method a whole lot easier. Now let's get into the other training method I want to talk about today. The second method we're going to be talking about is actually lollipopping, which is a pre-flowering type of training that maximizes the amount of light that is hitting the top of the plants and making sure all of the energy from the light is focused on the top of the plants rather than going down, and all of the nutrients from the soil can go all of the way up to the top where it's going to be used, and it's not going to be divided by a bunch of popcorn nugs. This method is compared to mainlining, and if you're not familiar with mainlining, what it is as your plant is growing through the veg stage, you will simply remove large, possibly branches, large amount of leaves from the plant as it's growing through the veg stage, avoiding having to do a huge lollipopping and have a short recovery period. If you're doing mainlining, every single time you do a mainline, you do a removal of the plant, you're going to cause a little bit of stress. And just like the topping, it is going to cause another recovery period. Now, what you could do is you could simply train your plant by bending it over, removing leaves as they die every once in a while. You have a healthy plant that doesn't need to be deforested, basically, and just keep it a healthy plant up until the decision is made that you want to put it into the flower stage, which is going to be half the height of what you want your plant to end up being approximately. Some stretch more, some stretch less, but the ballpark is make sure that it is half the height you want it to be, because it's going to double its height potentially in the flower stage. That's a pretty common height. So if you were wondering that, that's when you decide to flip it into flower. And once you get to that point, you're going to remove the bottom half or bottom 2/3 of the plant's vegetation, of the plant's branches, of the plant's leaves in general. Everything's just getting removed. You're going to have the bare branches that are going down to the root system. Those are going to suck up energy from the soil. They're gonna not be taken over by the buds. They're not gonna be taken over by the leaves. They're not gonna be taken over by other branches that aren't seeing the light. It's going to go straight up to the top. All of that mass that would have been built down there gets added into your buds and then adds to your final weight. And the reason this is important is because you don't want a whole lot of tiny buds that are hard to cure, and you don't want a lot of larvae that nobody wants to smoke. You don't want underdeveloped trichomes. You simply just don't want to deal with all of that when it comes to the trimming or harvesting stage of your plant's growth. If you got any value out of this video, please leave a like, and if you're new here, hit the subscribe button down below to see more videos like this one, educating you on cannabis. And if you know anyone who needs to see this video and know what training methods to use and what training methods you should avoid, go share this video onto social media or in DMs, whichever. But I will see you next time. Thank you very much.